Hello, welcome to part one of our GitHub Shots Bootcamp here on Dev Radio. And I'm going to turn this over very quickly to our panel of DevOps practitioners from Microsoft and GitHub. And Dave, let's go ahead and start with you today.
All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where and when you are watching this. My name's Dave Burnison. I'm a technical advocate from GitHub. Welcome to our GitHub Bootcamp on YouTube Live. Now, Microsoft's mission statement is to empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more. And GitHub's vision is to be the home for all developers. And we're bringing this together, bringing GitHub's vision and Microsoft's mission statement together to say that GitHub will become the home for your DevOps tools and will be empowering more than 73 million users to achieve more for their organizations. And we have 6 sessions. Some sessions are for everyone, and some are for more technical people. Now, today's session is for everyone. So in today's session, we're going to cover 4 important topics. We're going to start with why is DevOps important to your organization and why choose GitHub. Then how can the culture of DevOps and GitHub help your organization in becoming a high-performing DevOps organization? Then we'll introduce GitHub products and also talk about our roadmap and provide a little comparison of Azure DevOps and GitHub. Now, behind the scenes, we'll be answering your questions as we go, and we hope to have time for more questions at the end. Now, for the next 6 sessions, there are 18 of us that will present various GitHub topics. Now, please note, most of these presenters are not from GitHub. They're coming from the DevOps Dojo community at Microsoft. And these presenters are coming from all walks of life professionally. And they live all around the world. They have various backgrounds and work in different business units at Microsoft and at GitHub. And some are relatively new to working with GitHub, while others have worked with GitHub for several years. But the common bond we all share is our passion for empowering organizations to become high-performing DevOps organizations through deep training on DevOps culture, processes, and technologies. And behind the scenes, we'll have these subject matter experts from GitHub answering the questions that are typed into chat from the audience. Now, today's presenters are April Edwards, Gary Trinder, Pierre Doniegro, and Con Tang. April, the stage is all yours.
Thank you, Dave. Welcome, everyone, to episode 1 of the GitHub Bootcamp. So first off, I'm going to kick off why DevOps and GitHub. What's that compelling reason? So first of all, we're going to look at these 5 factors of why we're going to use GitHub and look at it and how it relates to DevOps. So I'm going to cover off the first 4, and my colleague Gary is going to take the 5th one. That's going to cover off GitHub and culture, because culture is critical. So why GitHub? Number 1, because it's a brand name. It supports open source and inner source and a massive developer community. Number 2, well, it is the developer platform and it enables innovation. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. And then we're going to talk about the security that's built into the platform and all those features that are capable with GitHub Advanced Security. And then next off, we're going to talk about the Microsoft strategy and our engineering teams and how we use GitHub internally at Microsoft. So first up, let's talk about the brand and the open source community and what really is inner source. So GitHub is the largest developer community on the planet. Our leader at Microsoft, Satya Nadella, said, we must learn to build on the ideas of others. And he's right. We know that 96% of deployed applications, software applications, use open source software in their building. We know open source software is the biggest differentiator in organizations across the globe. They're 30% more innovative, and it increases over 20% their developer satisfaction rates. Microsoft has a massively strong open source program, and we're one of the largest contributors to the open source community. And that's why we chose GitHub to partner up with and to reach that developer network. Microsoft in and of itself uses open source components in its everyday work. We wanted to create a culture that is created by open source that attracted job seekers, but also get these teams involved and create that better job seeker satisfaction rate. And when you look at some of these innovative companies that use GitHub every day to develop their code and their applications, you will recognize them. I think we all know about Netflix. And if you don't know about Netflix now, you must have missed the pandemic. We all know about Spotify and Lyft and Airbnb. They all leverage GitHub for their projects. So let's talk about inner source with GitHub. Inner source is great because it increases collaboration across teams. And this is a massive DevOps principle that we embed in our cultures. We need to break down those silos in our teams, and we need to have higher developer satisfaction because we want our developers to innovate. If it's easy to reuse code, we create a positive relationship with our developers. We increase our software delivery performance. We are more of an innovative company. If we have that negative relationship when we go to reuse our code, it's going to decrease our empowerment to work, and we're not going to write as good of code. And we do call this developer velocity. And this inner source capability with GitHub is super critical to enabling open source and collaboration in your teams. So now let's talk about why GitHub, part 2, developers and innovation. We have this thing in DevOps where we have collaboration as one of the key things we focus on. And there needs to be a massive culture change and people change in your organization. Think about how you work in your organization today, most of the time in silos. Think of your operational teams and your developer teams, and they're incentivized completely differently. As an ops person, I'm measured on keeping that infrastructure up 24/7. I don't like changes. As a developer, I'm there to push features, and that's how I'm incentivized. So those two things butt heads all the time, and they conflict. What we need to look at in organizations is how we're continuously delivering value across these teams, breaking down those silos and accelerating our innovation. Software development is actually the world's largest team sport, and everyone needs to be involved. Security is huge. Security is something that, as a developer, I struggle to embrace from day one because maybe I don't know how, or it's hard, or I'm working against time pressures in my organization. GitHub takes an end-to-end view of security from our open source projects to our deployed code. And there are huge investments that I'm going to talk about shortly that help innovate and help our developers secure their code. So it kind of takes something off their plate, but enables them to do more. And then we talk about this in terms of the DevOps lifecycle. We can end-to-end automate our workflows from the way we write our code to any cloud platform. So you say to me, well, I write code in a certain language. Okay, bring any language to GitHub. Do you write your code in Golang? How about C#? Or maybe you're a Ruby developer. We have tools built into the platform to recognize that code and help you develop that code no matter what it is. And JavaScript has been one of the top languages, with Python really catching up in terms of usage capability. So we have tools specifically for that and those languages in GitHub. So let's talk about the security platform and the features, because this is going to be one of the most critical things we're going to talk about, and probably every developer's nightmare. But it's important. When we talk about DevOps, we use this phrase in DevOps called shifting left. It means doing things early and often. And we want to fail fast and continuously deploy so that when we know something doesn't work, we can fix it quickly instead of it costing us further down that line. And the same thing with security. We want to do those things shifting left. We want to push our quality upstream. We want to take our development phase and put these changes in and enable that security from that point forward. We know that when we have a breach, because it's probably going to happen, and it's probably happened to all of us, it costs more when it hits production. Every single time, we know that it costs more when it hits production, and we know that a security breach can actually cost us more in the long run when it is found. We may have a payout. We may have regulatory fines that we face as organizations. We may be delivering an SLA to our customers that we may have breached that costs us millions and millions of dollars. And most importantly, we lose that customer trust. So by shifting left and enabling our developers to do more early in that cycle helps them bring that security conversation earlier into the game. We also know that there are a lot more developers out there than security researchers. So we do have security teams. They're absolutely critical. But a lot of times we get one or two security people coming into a development team or an operational team and say, where's that security feature? How do we enable security here? So by getting those features into the platform where our developers are, we can enable them earlier in that process. So let's talk about GitHub Advanced Security. How do we actually enable those developers? First and foremost, that security starts when you clone your code. Where are you cloning your code to? Your device. Is your device secure? And a lot of us as developers know that getting started on a project can be really hard. It can be time consuming. We're fighting security constraints, administrative privileges, or just privileges and rights to access things. And we just want to get started because we're really excited about the project. So looking at how we clone our code, whether that's into our favorite IDE like Visual Studio or VS Code, we can also leverage something like GitHub Codespaces, where we spin up a dev container in the cloud. We also have things inside the repository so that when we're writing our code, we can be proactive about how that code is handled. So the first thing we have within GitHub in the advanced security platform is dependency scanning. And this is using Dependabot. Now, Dependabot scans your repository for known vulnerable dependencies. It creates an alert and it notifies you, whether through a pull request or notification in the security center. And when that's found, it then tells you what version of that dependency you need to upgrade to. So for instance, you're deploying something with an NPM package and you're running version whatever, 1.x, and 1.x has a vulnerability. Dependabot's pulled it up and says you need to go to 1.7 to improve and fix that vulnerability scan. So Dependabot tells you when you have dependencies, especially within the open source world, where you may need to upgrade those bits into your software applications. Next up, we have Codeql. Codeql scans your repository. So once you submit a PR or push that code into your branch, it looks at your code base and looks for vulnerabilities within your code. Maybe your developers have pushed some code up that have that vulnerability included. Now, Codeql uses security patterns that comes from a broad range of security researchers across the globe and runs a scan using a workflow that is easily configurable in your workflow. And every time you make a push, make a pull request, push your code up, it scans that repository for those changes. We also have secret scanning. Now, secret scanning allows you to scan your repo for known types of secrets and tokens. And this will also scan your entire Git history. So not just what you're doing today, but maybe something that you pushed up into your repository before. And it will notify the owners of that repository and also notifies maybe where if you're pushing into the cloud like Azure, if it's using a connection string or something that's a known secret that needs to be handled differently. So what we have with the GitHub Advanced Security and GitHub is we have a place where we can develop our code. And that starts at the pre-commit phase. You know, we can do things like peer reviews, etc., but we're only human and we do make mistakes. And that's why we want to automate things. So we can look at that pre-commit phase and our development environments and looking at how we secure our IDEs, how we leverage things like GitHub Codespaces. And then when we commit that code, you know, are we using static code analysis, dependency management, and credential scanning? And then we start going into our continuous delivery process and we're deploying our code. Are we doing infrastructure as code scanning? Are we doing cloud configuration checks and security acceptance tests? Then when we go to that operational and monitoring phase, we really want to have continuous monitoring and some threat intelligence built around that. So then we go back into our development stage, we know exactly where maybe we need to make some improvements in our application performance and what other things are doing. And we need to start thinking about these features based on who would interact with them. So we want to think of it as roles, not jobs when it comes to DevOps. Not every person's going to engage with the feature that's built into advanced security in GitHub in the exact same way. So for instance, your security researchers, they're going to find vulnerabilities. They're going to amplify security research within the community and feed that back into the organization. If you're a maintainer, you need to make sure you have best practices in place for security documentation. And then when you do get that information about a new vulnerability, how are you handling it? But something you can privately discuss, raise an issue within your organization, and publish a security advisory to help get that thing fixed. And for developers, we want to know where there might be a dependency we're using and where there's a vulnerability in that place. We need to patch them and we need to get back to work. So we can do prevention of pushing bad code with Codeql, and we can automate our security updates. So last thing I want to touch on, why GitHub, point number 4, because it's a Microsoft strategy within our engineering teams working with GitHub itself. So Microsoft absolutely loves open source, and we do a lot of work in the open source community, not just with GitHub, but CNCF, etc. And there's lots of platforms we can talk about, but we're just going to talk about how we started getting into the open source community mostly. You know, we know when Git was born, we know when GitHub was founded in 2008, and through that time, we've contributed through that, and the capability has massively increased. In 2018, Microsoft made the investment to GitHub to reach that developer audience, so that not only can we reach that developer audience, we can encourage inner sourcing, improve the features within GitHub, and make it a very much cloud-ready product. So as a developer, we like to look at the complete tool chain, securing things end-to-end in our DevOps lifecycle. We can bring our own favorite tools to the cloud and then look at maybe leveraging some that might do things that we're not able to do with our current tools. But which starts all at the forefront with GitHub and our IDEs. So maybe you are using Visual Studio or Visual Studio Code to write your code, or maybe you're doing it from directly within GitHub or GitHub code spaces. We can push those changes into Azure, connect in, build those security features in, and it also allows for things like Power Apps and Power Automate for those low code and no developers. I call them no developers because it really allows every person to do something with very little to no code to automate something. And it's a full end-to-end life cycle and tool chain for our developers and our community. So how do we use GitHub at Microsoft? So we have our One Engineering Services. We call it One ES. It's a leading organization for this movement. We create software in the open. Think about Microsoft days of old. When you had a problem with some software or an application, you had to call someone, probably in another country, and you couldn't get help. Now you give direct feedback. So if you're using any of the products listed here, Windows, Xbox, Azure, etc., you can go straight to the team on GitHub, open up an issue, and put in a request for new features. Have a look at the publicly facing roadmap. By using these things, we have moved more directly to the customer. We have direct visibility of what the customers want to see, and you can speak to the engineering teams themselves. We build empathies within our developers when they understand what the products are actually being used for versus just delivering a product and not touching it. So how did we do that at Microsoft? How do we make that change in our DevOps processes? We had to eat our own dog food. So many years ago, we had to start consuming the products that we deliver to you as customers. So not only GitHub, but our tooling, Azure DevOps, and our own DevOps tooling. And that does include GitHub. So we use that internally within our engineering teams, and we look to use that every single day. So GitHub's and Azure DevOps have joined forces, and they're merging efforts to make GitHub the best DevOps tool for the enterprise. We use Azure DevOps every single day. We can look at some of the metrics here of how we do DevOps at Microsoft, how we made that culture change. But every single product you're seeing uses a DevOps product, whether it's GitHub or ADO or a combination of those two together. And DevOps isn't just a technology problem for everyone out there and also us at Microsoft. It's about culture. We had to go work together, change our culture, and look at how our products are and build that empathy and change our DevOps cycle to you all in the community as well. So I'm going to hand over now to my colleague, Gary, who's going to talk about DevOps and GitHub culture.
Thank you, April. Great section. Thank you very much. So thank you, April. So my name is Gary Trinder. I'm a modern work consultant. I work at Microsoft. I'm a part of the DevOps Dojo community, a community within Microsoft, and we, all things DevOps. And one of the big key pieces is culture, and that's what I'm going to talk through now, is how GitHub, it can help you get on that culture journey with DevOps. So the first thing I want to talk about really is speed of change. So Stuart Brand, who's a philosopher who came up with this model called pace layers, and we're describing how the different layers in the world change at different paces, and as we know, that change has been increased. But the idea is that we start from the bottom layer, that the nature element is the slowest layer for change. Up next is our culture to change, then up to governance, infrastructure, commerce, and then the technology is kind of last to change. So obviously, with the pandemic, that nature element has really been shaken up. That bottom level has had an impact on definitely people, organizations, all different cultures throughout the world. We're still living it now, and we will continue to live this, I'm sure, to some degree. But that has caused a lot of change. And one of the biggest changes that we've seen is that our work is different to what it was a couple of years ago, and that is shown with some of the surveys and the metrics that have been put out as we've gone through the pandemic, the changes in the way people are working, and the change in which we're expected to work when, you know, as things start to open up. People have different needs for their personal lives and things that they want to do. So this is a report from State of the Octopus, and it's interesting to see that 11% of people expect to go back to working co-located, which is a huge drop, you know, from 30% drop from 41% working in an office before. And it really shows the difference in the way that work is shifting, in that we're no longer surrounded by our colleagues. In some cases we are, but we're most likely going to be in a scenario where we've either gone into a fully remote scenario, or we're working in a hybrid. And that hybrid element, where we have people in offices, we have people remote, that's having a huge impact on the way that we actually work and deliver things. So just going on from that, we can see again, you know, the shift to hybrid, where that's starting to become the norm. We're going to be in front of our computers at home, and, you know, working with people in all different places, and that's globally as well, right? You know, with organizations, we've now got opportunities that we have more remote working, that we can work in different ways, and that impact has really had that impact and change has really had an impact on the culture of our organizations as well, and also around, you know, how do we get on that journey to be a high performing team. So just in front of you, there's sociologist Dr. Ron Westrum developed this Westrum topology about the different cultures, and the way that culture can influence the way that people work in those organizations. So we're seeing the shift from maybe where we have co-located organizations that are, you know, very hierarchical, top down, and now moving towards this more generative culture where it's much more open, it's less restrictive, and we can see that these changes need to be supported. It's not that we just change this overnight. This is, you know, this is long term, but the benefits of actually changing from you know, from the left hand side, a pathological culture, through to a more generative culture, is that you end up that you have a culture which is more trusting, where responsibility is shared. We're encouraged to work together rather than things going wrong and it being a problem. We look at it to, okay, how can we learn, and that's how we can generate cultures that where, you know, the creative side is really prioritized, and that allows us to do things which we maybe have not considered before, because we have that culture that can support that. The role of that culture, so that the culture that is more open and transparent and positive, we've actually seen that throughout the pandemic as well, that positive team culture has really helped mitigate the burnout that people feel when we're in challenging circumstances. You know, we have this group approach. We're more supportive. We empathize with people's situations, and we share that responsibility. it's not just one person who's trying to move things forward with as a team. So in the DevOps Dojo community that I'm a part of, we've seen this firsthand. We're a collective of people with different perspectives from all around the world, kind of brought together by this common passion and vision for the future. And because we're this inclusive and diverse team, we've started to build this trust and support of each other that allows us to move things forward. We don't have this stop approval, maybe older kind of approaches to work, but we're able to move things forward, and that enables us to be just really be more focused. We're aligned, we're trusting, we're more supportive, and we could be a bit more creative off the back of it. And one thing that I guess a quote that really kind of sums this up for me is, when you've got this positive team culture, if you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go together. And it's that when you go together, how do you build that trust? So we're talking about GitHub. GitHub can help support high performing teams, and there's 4, say, distinct pillars that can be thought of when thinking of high performance. So first, a collaborative culture, working together. Documentation for everything, automation, and empowerment as well of developers. And after all, the mission is to accelerate human progress through developer collaboration, and we get there by combining all 4 of these things to help build that high performance. So when we're talking about collaborative culture, this is all about trust and respect that really helps drive that culture forward. We have the empathy to look from other people's perspectives, and promoting this psychological safety as well, so that we're safe to challenge, and we're safe to put our ideas forward. That's how we're able to listen to other people's perspectives, maybe think, okay, I've changed my outlook, and actually that helps us move forward. But what we found is that high trust is crucial to building that collaborative culture. If we don't trust each other, then we're not going to be wanting to work together as effectively. In GitHub, how we collaborate, we can be through issues and pull requests. That's one way of being able to build that culture, and working in a transparent way where there's regular inspection, commenting, and feedback, and that enables you to have those conversations about your work, and give those opportunities to build that collaboration. I talked about documentation. So documentation is just overlooked, maybe we could say, but actually crucial for, one, being more productive, but also building that culture, as well as certainly that collaborative culture. So what we found is developers can see a huge boost when you've got documentation that's up to date and reliable. You go to a repository and you have some getting started documentation, either that's in the project wikis or contribution guidance, or even documentation delivered through GitHub Pages. That all helps move things forward, get people involved in projects. We don't have to worry about getting in meetings and explaining things to people. It's all written there and available. And if it's available in written form, it's available 24 hours a day whenever people are working with your distributed teams. So that really does help. And like I say, if it's not written down, if it's not in the issues list, how do we know it's going to get done? So, documenting everything in GitHub, it really does help. It helps us, understand why these things are being done, what's in progress, what have we done in the past, and I guess more importantly, what do we do next, and where do we go in the future? So being able to think about documentation as key. Another quote for you: the palest ink is better than the best memory. It's better to get things down than just having it in your head. If you get things down, you can share that with other people, and that's where, again, you can go further because you're bringing people in. Automation, key part of increasing the productivity of teams, reducing the friction and repetitive tasks. So we've got GitHub Actions to increase the amount of times that you're merging pull requests, and actually kind of making your job better and easier. No one likes to do the manual tasks over and over again. Shift those off to automation, where you can spend time on things that are more valuable, so that you can get from idea to value as quickly as you possibly can. And that part of that automation as well helps communicate, whether that is raising issues with tests when you've run a pull request and run unit tests, that clearly explains the state and what to do next, and that again helps that collaborative approach to work. And finally, empowering developers. The better tools you have, the more empowered you're going to feel, the more fulfilled you're going to feel, because you're working on things that are important. And when we're working on things that are important, that gives us a good better sense of well-being, rather than I'm doing tasks that are maybe not so important. But GitHub is full of different tools, actions that can really help you improve your productivity. Even that simple as things as having a search in a repository, being able to look at your code, in an easy way. Something as simple as that can really help your team performance. And actually reusing work as well. So there's GitHub Packages, reusing code that other people have written in your own projects as well, getting again from idea to value as quickly as possible. And by empowering developers, we have happy team, we have more outputs, we can do more, we can build on top of other people's work to make the world a happier place. And with that, I'm going to hand over to my colleague Pierre.
Thank you so much, Gary. Hello, everyone. My name is Pierre. I'm a DevOps architect at Microsoft. Now that you have seen about why GitHub and GitHub culture, I am going to introduce to you GitHub product and roadmap. So let's dive in. Aside from the personal free account of GitHub, which you can have, there are two flavors here: GitHub Enterprise Server, which is on-prem, and GitHub Enterprise Cloud. The difference is that GitHub Enterprise Cloud is hosted by Microsoft, by GitHub, and GitHub Enterprise Server is your self-hosted environment on your prem. So on the right pane here, based on GitHub Enterprise Cloud, you can see some of the features which GitHub has. These are the most common, I hear an echo. These are the most common features which are being used right now. But if you want to see the full features, you can navigate to github.com/features. So let's delve into some of those features already. So April has spoken, to you, introduce you about GitHub Advanced Security. Well, code scanning is one of the GitHub Advanced Security components. It prevents vulnerabilities from the start. The next one is secret scanning. So secret scanning identifies secret as early as possible. And the reason being, we use to embed credentials, connection strengths, and login and password within the repo. It's because of security these days, it's not advisable to actually put this into your configuration files under the repo. So secret scanning will help you identify those, and you can remove them to make your application a little more secure. Dependency scanning and auto security update. Okay, so April also spoke to you about NPM packages and so forth, but we actually do have Dependabat alerts, which gets you notified whenever you are changing a version of a certain, packages and so forth. You get notified when there are new vulnerabilities so that you can go ahead and actually make those changes into your repo. Code spaces. Well, code spaces, it's instant development environment in the cloud, where you can also, within seconds, actually put up an environment either in the cloud or on your desktop. And it helps you maintain the collaborations and with any team, regardless of where they are located. Automated delivery. As my colleagues has also briefly mentioned it, automation is a key today for everything. Why? Because we are human, we make more mistakes. And the more you can automate, it helps you to resolve those mistakes and so forth. But in GitHub, the automations are actually, we call them workflows. From code to cloud, you can actually deploy very easily. And so when it comes to GitHub Actions for Azure, there are over 120 ready-to-use actions to Azure, which means you can just click and you can deploy into Azure. In today's fast-paced environment, you can deploy code seamlessly and with all the changes which are happening. The next one is GitHub Packages. Okay, so you can see whether you use NPM, Docker, or Maven, or Cradle, those packages help you to manage your dependencies in a centralized location. Discussions. Discussions is an excellent way to collaborate with your peers, whether it's conversation about code and community and so forth. And it helps everyone being on the same page, since based on culture, we can be remotely located. And then GitHub Mobile, you can even collaborate and develop on the go on your cell phone or tablet. Enterprise custom repository role. So today, you can actually customize your repo based on the role which you have in the enterprise. Whether you are a technical person or non-technical person, where you can have read-only, you can access the repo based on the role which you are in. And to configure it, it's really easy to do. You can see on the right pane how you can go ahead and configure the repos. Gary has mentioned issues, okay? And you can see issues are a way for you to make your project planning into GitHub. The interesting thing here is you can have those large project issues made either on a table or on the board. And GitHub Copilot, wow. So talking about artificial intelligence, this is your AI pair programmer, which helps you to write code faster and with less work. So you can see at every phase of the technology, you have help from everywhere. Now, collaboration from your coworkers, collaboration from artificial intelligence, AI pair programmer, and so forth. Now, I'm going to talk to you about the GitHub public roadmap. In other words, what's coming next? Okay, so I'm going to switch here to go through a quick demo about GitHub product roadmap. Okay, to access it, you can see the URL from here. Someone can paste it in the chat room. I did mention to you in terms of issues how you can toggle between tables and board. you can see all the issues, which is in a table format, and I can toggle back to board. Okay, and then on the underneath GitHub public roadmap, you can see right now there are 7 items on which you can sort or navigate through the roadmap. In addition to that, so you can see as I click, it's changing. In addition to that, you can search. Let's say I type in here GitHub Actions. Okay. And you can see there are 22 actions based on where you are. If for Q1, which is right now, January to March, these are all the features coming up. If I scroll all the way to the right, these are what's on the roadmap coming up in the future. Does anyone have any question about using the roadmap?
Pierre, why don't you do a quick search for us for DORA KPI? Because a lot of people are asking that question.
Okay, so all I need to do, thanks, Cam, for asking that great question. All I need to do is just type in DORA. When I look out into my roadmap, I don't see anything. So I scroll all the way to the right, and guess what? It's coming in the future. I don't know when, okay? But if I click here, the engineering, the insight, you can see now that engineering leader and organization DORA report. So it's in the backlog. Right now, it's not scheduled for any one of the queue of the current time. But I want to thank you so much for listening. And please note that throughout the week, all of these features which I introduced to you will be in deep dive in some sessions. So Cam, please take it away.
All right, so thank you. Thank you very much, my friend Pierre. So again, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on when and where you watch this a live event. So I'm going to ask one of the most frequently asked question, both inside of Microsoft and outside. As a matter of fact, I was watching the online question. I did see a lot of question about this Azure DevOps and the GitHub comparison. So I'm going to answer your question in next 15 minutes, right? What are the differences? And of course, you will ask when to use what. So I'm going to go back a little bit of history, right? So before we start GitHub by Dojo community about 2 years ago, I will say, this is our reference implementation. As you can see, we used, of course, Azure boards, a repository, artifacts, the task plane, right, and of course the pipeline. And one of the challenges actually we had was we have to integrate with the security, right? Again, security is very important. So at the time, we actually had a lot of discussion internally, say which, the code scans, the open source supply chain, all the tools, how we're going to integrate, which one we're going to use it. And so before, like I said, GitHub, we're using this reference implementation. Of course, as you can see, we integrate with a lot of open source tools. And if that's what currently you're using, you're happy with it, yes, it worked for us as well, right? A lot of our projects, we're still using this reference implementation, right? Really end-to-end, we're really even putting in our Dojo readiness. So all the people go through the Dojo training, we're all using the ADO version, like this version. If you're happy with it, that's the reference implementation. Now let's move to GitHub version, right? So when we start with GitHub, as you have seen from Pierre, he walked you through almost everything from planning, as you can see. Let me just quickly go through the animation here. Right, so you can technically, if you want to leverage everything from GitHub, right, from planning, from the development, from the repositories, from the security, from the deployment, you can use GitHub version if, right, all the features actually satisfies your need. Now, I want to actually, right, let's pause for a second to look at a little bit, kind of give a little bit of observation here. So 3 things actually stand out. So as you all know, right, DevOps is really at least at first is about economical flow. So you have to be able to flow. And in my 20 plus years actually in this industry and over past 10 years worked with many customers, right? One of the things, the first thing is the data and process integrity. What happened was that when you use different tool, you integrate. And a lot of time, actually, the process and the data integrity was not there. So the moment you, let's say, you make a change in one of the tools, and then the upgrade version, then you have to redo all the stitching together, right? So with GitHub, like I say, if all the features satisfies your need, and you don't have to worry about that because behind the scene, we really ensure the data integrity, we really ensure the process integrity, right? So really makes your job easy. Now, the second one is openness. So again, right, this is an open platform. Everybody can integrate. So, but what about if you have a preference, right? You say, well, I use this one. What about code scan? I always use 45. I used actually in my previous job, I used a 45 a lot. So, but it's very easy. You actually can take the connection and then you can actually plug in and everything will just work like a charm, right? So it's really open, right? So that's another great advantage. The last one, which is my favorite, I will give you 2 examples, is the innovation from community. So for example, right, 2 years ago when we started with this journey, so we said we want to actually do a chat ops use case. So that means we use Microsoft Teams at the front end and behind the scene, we have GitHub. So we want to be able to have a bi-directional real-time right interaction used through chat ops. So of course you need a little chatbot right in the middle. And so at the time we were developing this use case, and we could not find that a chatbot enables Microsoft Team work with GitHub. So then we were deciding, we said, well, what we should do, right? Because that's a really collaboration use case. Before we know, in a couple of weeks, actually, I remember, right, I got notification say, hey, this chatbot is ready. And so when you plug in, it just worked like jump, right? So this is the power of a community, right? Because if you need it, most likely someone else also need as well, right? So then you can really quickly leverage that new capability. And also, I'm going to give you, right, so we're using other people's work. Well, what about the contribute back? And as Pierre right, did a little search with Dora KPI. So this is one of the very frequently asked questions, say, well, how do you actually implement Dora KPI on top of GitHub? So it's in the future roadmap, but then customer can't wait, right? So we said, well, then we need to really think about it, right? So we started to develop our Dora KPI, which on top of it, we have a Grafana. Of course, it will take a lot of time, decide to use Grafana. And then we need to integrate with GitHub. So we kind of working through the process. And so once we implement it and we said, you know what, we've been leveraging a lot of open source, we should give back. So our colleague, Charlie and Shenyu, they basically pushed that GitHub apps actually into GitHub marketplace. So now you can actually use that GitHub app and do your KPI. On top of that, you can run the Grafana or any other visualization too. So that's a session actually tomorrow, Thursday. Actually, we're going to walk through right how to actually do the KPI, Dora KPI on top of GitHub using Grafana, right? So it's a really powerful use case, how we can use it and how we can actually contribute back. Now, you might say, well, I'm using OKR. I'm building the big epic features. I have my delivery plan. I have my portfolio, right? So GitHub issue not quite there yet. I still love my Azure board. I really want to use it. I want to leverage that. Absolutely fine, right? So if that's what you want to do, stay with Azure boards because it does provide all the great agile management feature for you. And then you say, you know what, for the rest, I want to leverage GitHub, right? The developer velocity, the securities, and all that, right? So absolutely fine. So as a matter of fact, this picture you're seeing right now is going to be going through from today all the way to session 6. So we use this as a reference implementation to demo section by section by section. So for example, right, with Azure boards with GitHub, we will demonstrate, for example, use case like when you run your pipeline, right? You trigger the testing, and then you basically identify a defect, and that defect actually can automatically, I should say, back to the Azure boards. Or maybe when you work on the code, you in the repository, and you want the link to your user story, right? With the requirement, and you can do that as well, right? So we're going to demonstrate throughout the week, throughout the 3 weeks, right? You will see all the use cases. So that's our reference implementation. Now, after all the 3 scenarios, let's do one picture view, right? See the side-by-side comparison. So of course, right, this is DevOps. So we're from business ideas all the way to the operation and measurement. So let's take a look at what the feature capabilities we have in Azure DevOps, right? So side by side, you look at the functionality and look at the side by side. So again, right, some of them probably, especially in the development, in the ideas, not quite right there, but then others we actually cover. And then let's look at GitHub. So when you do GitHub, business, right, project issues, discussion, and now you start to see code spaces and co-pilots and so on, right? So this is the feature in terms of based on the functionality. So this is what we're going to talk about if you want to use both, right? And then we give you kind of high-level recommendation. Again, right, the world always shades are gray. You might have your unique needs, but it's just general guidance. And so if you look at it, right, if you are, right, really want to do sophisticated agile management, everything, right, you use Azure Board. And then for the rest, actually, right, the first choice, you want to use GitHub. Now, you might say, hey, I noticed something. The Azure boards, actually, you have a kind of first choice and a second choice, right, and the green and the red. What does that mean? So we actually did a side-by-side comparison. So if you look at it, if you really want agile management, right, the dashboard, the KPI, the Azure board is the tool for you. But if you're looking more from a developer velocity, right, developer, the pull request, the repos, the discussion side of KPI, and then actually GitHub Insight give you really, really solid dashboard, right? So that's kind of at a big picture. Again, the world is a shades of gray. This is our I would say generic view in terms of GitHub versus ADO. People asked about, the worry about the ADO and the GitHub. So this is kind of trajectory, right? So we're going to continuously support ADO. But then if you look at a GitHub, it's just a GitHub is really open and there's so many contributors. Like I gave example, right? You need something, okay, I'm going to work on it and check in. And someone say, hey, I need it too. And they will use it. Once they use it, they continuously refine, they continuously improve, right? So as you can see, code spaces, when we started, we said, oh, when that's going to be ready, right? And then before we know, it went to GA. And the co-pilot, right? People talked about it. Okay, people started to use it, right? So it's really, really a lot of innovation. So trajectory, we will say GitHub feature function looks like it's much more faster. Of course, we still continue support the ADO. So we finished 4 topics. I hope we're still on time. So this is the first session, right? I want to conclude this session to really ask a question, right? What the problem do we try to solve in DevOps? I know there's so many definitions out there. I like being simple. So when people, if you don't have any knowledge about DevOps, right, people ask me, what is DevOps? I say, well, I'm building the digital product better, quicker, cheaper, and secure. But if it's young kids ask me, say, what do you do, right? I say, oh, I'm building game for you, online game. So you can have a new feature. It's not going to break. And your mom will pay you, right? Not too expensive. So that's how I explain what is DevOps. So let's actually look at, right, peel the onion. If that's, at a very simple level, let's look at actually what is DevOps right next year. So at the end of the day, right, we want to build software quicker, better, cheaper, and secure. So we're building this digital product. But then what is the attribute of the digital product, right? What's the actual attribute to be a great product? So the first thing, of course, it has to be valuable, right? You have to solve someone's problem. and even better, the most difficult problem. And then you really need to be usable, right? Because at the end of the day, the best product using DevOps we're building is with the user journey. It's very important, right? And it needs to be feasible technically, right? Technically continues to improve and so on. It needs to be feasible and needs to be viable. Because a lot of time we do DevOps, we can satisfy everything, but it doesn't work for the business. So you really have to consider, right, all those 4 elements when you're building DevOps, building that end product, the great product. Now let's peel the onion one more time. What does it mean, the product? I think a lot of people, right, ignore one of them. I'm going to go through, right? So if you look at any project in your life, in my 20 plus years, right? Any project, any product I build, I have these 4 balls in the air. Because then, of course, I have to create a feature, right? That's the main goal. And no matter how great you are, your team, you're going to always introduce a defect. And you always have, you're going to have a risk because all the security, everything coming, right? And the hacking and so on. So you're always going to have a risk. And one thing I think a lot of business side, right? We talk about DevOps, business IT alignment is a technical debt. We tend to be ignore this component because on the surface, right, our business, they will know, yeah, you have a new feature, new launch. And if you have something doesn't work, right, the defect, people will know. Well, if you have something breach, you know, there's risk. But then technical debt is an area actually business won't see it, but it can significant actually impact your speed, your quality of your feature, right? So remember, there's 4 balls in the air. Now let's look at it, right? So regardless, right, any DevOps, you're gonna have this feature move to the production. Excuse me, and you're gonna have a defect. You're gonna have risk. You're gonna have a technical debt, right? Then let's see how well. So if we all agree, right, we'll peel the onion. This is a fundamental problem we try to solve. But how GitHub will help you to enable your value stream, right? So at the end of the day, you want a much bigger, better feature, right? You want a smaller defect. Again, you cannot completely eliminate. You will still have it. And then you probably still have a little bit of risk, but you want to minimize, right? And of course, you want a lower technical debt. So how do we do that? And of course, right, in order to create a bigger feature, you really GitHub enables developer velocity, which you're going to see throughout the session. And then if you look at it, right, again, I was a hardcore developer, right? I've been 20 some years in this IT and writing code and tech lead and architect and everything. And think of the defect most of the time created in my life I've seen was because of lack of communication, right? Or not effective communication. So GitHub really enables that flow, right? The great communication between all the stakeholders. And April talked about, right, end-to-end security, which we're going to deep dive in the future session. So that really will help you lower the risk. And finally, it's the incredible flexible architecture from GitHub, which well, like I said, all of us not from GitHub. We actually learned the GitHub in the hallway. That's why we're showing here, right? Showing the learning we have. And one of the eye-opening, I would say, event from a people who from ADO, Azure DevOps, move to GitHub is the architecture. It's the information architecture is very different, but then it's so flexible. So with that, if you look at what we're going to do is in the next week, Tuesday, Thursday, we're going to deep dive into the developer velocity. And then in session 6, which is the last one, we're going to bring everything together. We're going to show you how we do inner source. And then in the session 5, we're going to do end-to-end security. You're going to see everything end-to-end. And then finally, I think I hear some noise in the background. And then on Thursday, this Thursday, 2 days from now, we're going to actually walk you through the information architecture in GitHub. So it's really exciting, right? We bring this everything together. It's all from a learner's perspective, right? Again, we're not from GitHub. We are actually from all walks of life. So we're going to show you what we have learned. And so with that, I'm going to hand over to Dave to wrap up.
Thanks, Con. A great session, Con, Pierre, Gary, April. Awesome information. There was definitely a extensive thread in the chat here, and I just want to re-emphasize, for those of you that are using Azure DevOps today, looking at Azure DevOps and GitHub, Azure DevOps is not going away. With the backing of Microsoft, we can afford to support both platforms for the long term. We've got thousands of enterprises using Azure DevOps today. But we are shifting our strategic investments over to GitHub because GitHub is the largest developer platform on earth. And so you see the trend here. Yes, Azure DevOps will not only be supported, it will get new features as well. But those big features like code spaces, advanced security, Copilot, things like that are being focused on GitHub, and we've got ways to integrate those together. All right, we're at time. We thank you for all of your questions and everything today. Hopefully we got them all answered in chat. But this wraps up session 1, and we look forward to seeing everyone at session 2. So please join us on Thursday, February 3rd, where we will focus on the architecture of GitHub Enterprise and managing projects with GitHub. We'll cover GitHub Enterprise architecture, GitHub Agile management, insights that you can gain using GitHub, and DevOps KPIs with Grafana. And of course, we'll have our subject matter experts monitoring chat to answer your questions as we go. But you don't have to wait until our next session to learn more or get started with GitHub. Reach out to us at msusdev@microsoft.com. Learn more about DevOps Dojo at https://aka.ms/dojo-intro, or even start your free trial today at https://github.com/organizations/enterprise_plan. And with that, I want to thank you for attending today, and we will see you for session number 2.